was around Christmas time, a few years back now. My parents went away for work and I was left home alone for a few days. My house was massive and I had a lot of land around it, so I had quite a nice time being on my own, just driving the quad bikes and doing some fun stuff. However, I'd never been home alone before and I was quite scared at the concept. Mainly because we just moved into this house and apparently it was haunted. Little did I know, this would be the most terrifying and worst night of my entire life. So on the first night, I cooked some dinner and then I got into bed around 10 PM. But at around 2 AM, I was awoken by someone talking, some kind of chanting. It was terrifying. It sounded like some kind of satanic mantra, and it sounded like it was coming from in my garden. So, I got up and I looked out of the window. In the distance, I saw something bright. It was a flame. I could just about see a fire, but I couldn't see anything else. But then it came again. I froze with fear and hid beneath the window, but I had no idea what to do. I couldn't see where this sound was coming from. All I knew was that it sounded like some kind of horrific chant. So, I decided to look out of the window again and have a good look. I could see the flame more clearly now, and to my horror, I saw it. There was a group, dozens and dozens of people, chanting around a fire. Again, it came. It almost sounded like they were saying, "Come here, devil," or "Come here, Satan," but what the hell was going on? But the main problem here was, this fire was on my property in my garden. So it was my duty to sort out what was going on. So I went into the kitchen, I grabbed a knife, and I walked outside. I plucked up the courage and I shouted, "Oi, who are you? What are you doing on my property?" There was obviously no reply, but the chanting continued. But I had no option but to confront this congress. So I walked over to where the flame was. It happened to be right next to my dirt bike track. As I got closer though, I could see more clearly. I must have been about 10-20 meters away from them when I could see. There must have been dozens and dozens of them, all around this fire, marching round it, all wearing robes with their hoods up, chanting and chanting and chanting. But then one of them turned round and saw me. He looked me dead in the eyes, and he said, I froze for a minute, before turning around and sprinting back to my house. It sounded like he said, "Satan will get you." But he said it in some kind of horrible, satanic voice. I ran as fast as I possibly could all the way back home. Once I got there, I looked behind me. The one man that saw me was still there, away from the crowd, just staring at me. However, the rest of the crowd remained chanting and dancing around the flame. I was too scared to even take into account that there was a load of random people in my garden and a massive flame. I was just terrified at what was happening, the fact they were chanting. What the hell was going on here? As soon as I was back inside, I grabbed my phone and I called the police. I said, help me, help me, help me. There's people in my garden. It's like a cult or something. They're dancing around a flame. But the police officer, really? And then he hung up the phone. He thought I was a prank caller. But trust me, this wasn't a prank call. I tried to call my parents, but nobody answered. They were fast asleep. I didn't know what to do. There were no houses near me, so I couldn't run to a neighbour. My friends were all out of town, so I couldn't go to them. Instead, I had to just hide under my bed until it all stopped. I sat there for hours and hours hidden, covering my ears from the horrific sound which was going on. It was literally like torture. But eventually, sunrise came. I crawled out from under my bed, and I looked out of the window. The chanting had stopped, and the fire had gone out. I quickly ran outside all the way over to where the fire was. But there was nothing there. Not even a stick, not even burnt out ash on the floor. Nothing. I thought to myself, well, it must have been some kind of crazy dream. But behind me, there was a robe on the floor, right where the guy was standing when he stared at me. On top of the robe was a piece of paper. It read, "You will say nothing." I was shocked and terrified. What the hell was this? This obviously wasn't just a dream. Well, I was petrified and I didn't know what to do, so I went back inside. The following night, nothing happened. My parents returned 2 days later, and I told them everything that had happened and how crazy the whole situation was. But they didn't believe me about anything. I showed them the robe and the piece of paper. They thought I was just playing fancy dress and had just written a note. But I knew I hadn't done that. But they still didn't believe me. It's years later since that night, but it remains the worst night of my life. And I still have no idea who those people were, if they're even real. Did I imagine it? And who wrote that note? Was it some sort of ghostly cult? Or was it something even worse? It was Halloween 2016, right in the middle of the clown epidemic. My parents went away for the weekend, so I was home alone for a while. I got into bed, but I was awoken around midnight by my doorbell going off. I was very surprised, because my house was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles and miles of farmland. And we never normally get people come here, especially not in the middle of the night. Nevertheless, I got out of bed, walked along my corridor, and looked out of the window. To my horror, I saw a clown standing on the end of my driveway. I quickly ducked, because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know who this person was. I tried to call my parents, but they didn't answer. That was when I heard my doorbell go off. I looked back out the window, but the clown was still standing on the end of my driveway. That's when I realised there was two of them. The one standing under my driveway was standing there. He lifted his hand and he waved at me. There was another one though, on my doorstep, banging on my door. I looked out of the CCTV camera. He was holding a knife. I thought, crap, what am I going to do? There's two people on the end of my driveway. What the hell am I going to do? Then things got even worse. I heard a horrific sound. It was a chainsaw. I tried to stay hidden below the window, but now there were 3 people on my driveway, and my house was in the middle of nowhere. What the hell was going on? I then heard a squeaking sound. I turned around and looked out of my other window to my back garden. Surely enough, there was a clown sitting on the swing. Luckily, it wasn't another one. It was the one that was banging on the door. However, the other one remained on the end of my driveway, revving the chainsaw. I was absolutely terrified out of my mind now. What the hell was I meant to do? My only option was to call the police. So, sure enough, I picked up my phone and I called them. I told them there was a bunch of clowns standing on my driveway and in my garden. I thought the police officer would just laugh and think it was just some kind of joke. But no, he was deadly serious and he said, "Stay exactly where you are. Don't go outside. Don't even look out of the window." So, as he said, I stayed hidden below the window, but the banging and the sounds from the chainsaws continued, extremely loudly. Then, I saw the glare of the flashing lights on the window. Only then did I turn around and look out of the window. The police cars were there. There wasn't just one, there was a whole patrol of them on my driveway. But, where were the clowns? They were no longer there. One of the policemen came in and asked me a few questions, while the others searched the forest nearby and all of the farmland, as well as the property. He told me to call my parents, so I did. But they still did not answer. After waiting for around an hour, the police came back, saying the whole property and farmland was clear. But I knew they were on my driveway. But maybe they just saw the flashing lights and they dipped. Well, as soon as the policeman left, I saw a head poke out of one of the bushes. There was still one of them on my property. He looked me dead in the eyes, and he put his finger to his mouth, almost saying, "Shh, don't say anything." At this point I was petrified, but I obviously did not want to call the police back. So I only had one real option. I ran downstairs and went to my dad's gun locker. I knew the password and there were quite a lot of guns in there. I grabbed a hunting rifle, went back up to the window and opened it. There was nobody there, but I pulled out the gun, pointed it out the window, shot it and said, "Who are you? What do you want? Get off my property now." But then I heard a gunshot, faint in the distance. It wasn't loud at all, and it sounded like it was a long, long way away. And from that moment onwards, the clowns never returned. I don't know what happened to them, and I don't know who they were. I guess I never will. It was the beginning of the summer holidays a few years back. My parents had gone away and I was at home on my own. I had the house to myself for 2 weeks, so I decided I'd throw a party at some point. I invited all of my college friends and we planned a day. However, on the second day of me being home alone, I heard someone outside when I was laying in bed. I could hear footsteps all over my front drive. And the thing is, I live in the middle of the countryside, so no one's ever here. That's when things turned very bad. I then heard a gunshot. I hid behind my bed, but peered over the window to see if I could see anybody out there. When I looked out, there was a shadow standing on the end of my driveway, holding a gun. I didn't know anybody that lived around this area, and I didn't know anybody who owned a gun either. But I somehow managed to build up the courage to go up to the window and shout out, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man stared up at me and tilted his head. He then walked a few more paces towards my house, right up to the front door. That was when I heard my doorbell go off. A part of me thought this could be one of my friends, but inside, deep down, I knew it wasn't. I didn't want to go downstairs and open the door, but I knew I had to do something. So I crept downstairs and went into the kitchen, where I grabbed a knife. I then went back upstairs and looked out of the window to see if I could see him and track his movement. He was still there, but he wasn't moving. But then the man started banging on my doors. I was terrified now, so I decided to get my phone and call my parents and tell them everything that was going on. They told me to try and identify the man, or maybe get a picture of him, and also call the police immediately. I leant over the window and got a picture of the man. Then I dialed in 111. The police answered and I told them that there was a strange man standing on my driveway and he had a gun. They asked for my location and said they'd be there shortly. I waited for a few minutes. The man was still standing right on my porch. I turned round to my other window and I could see the flashing light from the police cars. But when I turned back round to check on the man, he was gone. The police started knocking on my doors, so I went downstairs and let them in. I told them everything that had happened and that the man had just vanished suddenly. So they asked me for the picture which I took, so they could try and identify the man. I pulled out my phone and went to my photos. But to my horror, the man was not there. The photo which I had taken was just of my porch. The man had vanished from the picture, but I could have sworn he was in that picture. I said to the police, "This sounds crazy, but honestly, he was there. He was there. He was on my porch and I took a picture of it." But they didn't believe me. They told me to calm down and go back to bed. So they left and I called my parents and told them what had happened. My parents weren't very happy that the police didn't do a full search of the property to see if the man had just gone hidden somewhere. But I trusted in the police, and if they said the man wasn't there, then he wasn't there. But then, things got even crazier. As I was getting into bed, I heard a noise. It sounded like my door opening. I quickly grabbed the knife from beside my bed and walked down the corridor. At the end of the corridor was a window. I approached it and looked outside. To my horror, my front door was wide open. At first I thought maybe the police just left it open. But then I heard footsteps, along with knocking. I turned around to see a figure standing there, a few meters away from me, staring straight at me. I wanted to call the police again, but I couldn't. I was too scared to pull my phone out. I said to the man, "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" But the man, he did not reply. He just stood there, staring straight at me. It felt like he was staring straight through my soul. We were standing there, at a stalemate, for a few seconds. But then I decided I need to do something. So I plucked up the courage and I decided to walk past the man into my room, see if he did anything. And to my surprise, when I walked past him, he didn't do a thing. He didn't even turn, he didn't turn his head, his eyes didn't move. No, he just stayed fixated on the window next to where I had been standing. I was convinced something very, very strange was going on, and I didn't know if this man was real as such, because surely he would have come for me. As I entered my room, I turned around and looked back out into the corridor. The man was gone. I looked in all of the closets, all of the rooms which were shut, outside. He was nowhere to be seen. I was extremely confused now and terrified. So I picked up my phone and called my parents. I told them what had just happened and how this man was back in my house again, and then he just vanished. They thought the whole situation was strange. And then I said to my mum, "Mum, this is going to sound crazy, okay? But please just hear me out. Has anything strange happened in this house? Like murders or people dying, or what's the history of this house?" But she didn't have a clue. She told me to get some sleep and maybe research it in the morning. So I went to sleep that night. In the morning when I woke up, I went straight onto my phone and started researching the house. To my horror, I found out the history of the place. A man lived here. He shot his family before shooting himself. I was shocked. However, this somehow could have explained the gun. I told my mum and she was just as scared. But there was nothing else we could do. All I knew was what I saw. But did a man really enter my house? I guess I will never know. But I am certain that something was in my house.